On June 22nd, 2026, at around 7:30 in the evening, Kushva was living through an ordinary Monday in the Ural Mountains. People were still outside, cars stood in the courtyards, families were preparing dinner, and heavy, almost black clouds were gathering above Kushva Pond. First came the rain, then large hailstones began hammering against rooftops and windows. The wind intensified, but for a city at the foot of the Urals, it still looked like another powerful summer thunderstorm. Earlier that day, forecasters had warned of torrential rain, hail, and violent wind gusts, but there had been no precise warning that a tornado would pass directly through residential neighborhoods. Because of that, the first crucial minutes were lost. People filmed the unusual sky with their phones, looked out of their windows, and hurried to remove loose objects from their yards. They did not yet understand that a rotating column of air was already forming above the water. Within minutes it would enter the city, and then the familiar streets of Kushva would become a place where roofs vanished in seconds, walls collapsed inward, and the only warning was a rapidly approaching roar. Meteorologists would later reconstruct what happened almost minute by minute. The most active section of a cyclone was passing across the northern part of Sverdlovsk Oblast. Warm, humid air collided with a colder air mass, making the atmosphere extremely unstable, while the direction and speed of the wind changed sharply with altitude. This kind of wind shear can force a powerful thunderstorm cell to begin rotating. At the Kushva weather station, instruments recorded intense rainfall, hailstones more than 3 centimeters in diameter, and winds of approximately 20 meters per second. But that figure described only the general surface wind, not the speed inside the funnel itself. Galina Sheparenko, chief forecaster at the Ural Department for Hydrometeorology, explained that tornadoes do occur in the region, but they usually pass through forests, leaving long corridors of fallen trees behind them. That evening, everything unfolded differently. The vortex formed above Kushva Pond, as though it had selected the most dangerous route possible. Ahead of it lay the waterfront, private homes, and streets where no one had ever built a tornado shelter. But the worst part was this. The city saw the danger only when almost no time remained to prepare. At first, a dark tail appeared beneath the base of the storm above the pond. It stretched downward, touched the water, and rapidly became denser. The wind lifted spray, dust, and loose debris into the air, concealing the lower part of the funnel. Then the tornado began moving from south to north, directly toward the residential districts. According to local residents, its journey through the city lasted approximately 10 minutes. Only 10 minutes. Less time than an ordinary drive across Kushva. Yet during those minutes, the vortex traveled roughly 2.5 kilometers along Pervomaiskaya Street, Komuna Street, and farther toward Chapayeva Street. People tried to understand which direction it would take, but from close range, the funnel did not resemble the clean, narrow cone seen in films. It was a moving wall of rain, dust, tree branches, and debris. Visibility disappeared. The air filled with the cracking of wood and the grinding roar of metal. Those caught outside ran toward apartment entrances and houses. Those already indoors moved away from the windows. Some people, however, continued filming. Then the first roofs rose into the air as though torn away by an invisible hand, and everyone understood that this was no longer an ordinary thunderstorm. The impact came without warning. Sheets of metal and entire roof structures were ripped from buildings. Trees snapped or were torn out by their roots, and severed power lines fell across the roads. Debris flew through courtyards and crashed into parked vehicles. In the private residential sector, pressure and wind opened houses one after another. First the roof disappeared, then the walls collapsed, and rooms that had been safe only seconds earlier were suddenly exposed to the sky. The destruction was particularly severe on Chapayeva Street. Some wooden houses were reduced to piles of logs, while only fragments of walls remained standing in others. Based on the most severe damage, the tornado was provisionally classified as Category 3 on the Fujita scale. Such an assessment indicates winds capable of tearing roofs away and destroying substantial structures. Some specialists suggested speeds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour. But inside the city, no one was thinking about scientific scales. There were only seconds, deafening noise, and impossible decisions. Run into the corridor, hide in the bathroom, cover a child with your own body, or try to escape from a house that had already begun to collapse. Then came the moment that made this tornado historic for the Urals. It did not weaken at the edge of the city, and it did not turn back toward the forest. It crossed directly through residential Kushva. Even more disturbingly, later analysis of satellite images suggested that the destructive vortex over the city may not have been the only one. Another tornado passed farther north, leaving an enormous corridor of flattened forest, while the urban tornado continued beyond Kushva. Researchers discovered dozens of kilometers of damaged woodland and hundreds of hectares of fallen trees. What residents had seen between their homes was only a brief section of a far longer path. But inside the city, that section was the most dangerous. When the funnel passed the central districts and began moving away, the disaster did not end. 15 electrical transmission lines had been damaged. Thousands of homes were plunged into darkness. Water and communication services failed, and gas supplies had to be shut down in some neighborhoods. Streets were blocked by trees, electrical wires, and pieces of roofing. Kushva had survived the direct strike, but now the city had to rescue people in darkness, among destroyed homes while the storm continued overhead. The power failure reached far beyond the residential streets. Factories, pumping stations, and municipal systems stopped working. At the Yuzhnaya mine, 16 miners were unable to return from underground because the lifting equipment had stopped when the electricity failed. While rescuers above ground struggled through blocked roads and wreckage, the men below waited, not knowing how badly the city's infrastructure had been damaged or when power would return. Hospitals switched to emergency generators. Electrical crews attempted to redirect power through alternative lines. Municipal workers cleared the roads, and firefighters and medical teams inspected the damaged neighborhoods. A temporary shelter was prepared at the House of Children's Creativity for residents who had lost their homes. Water service was restored before midnight. The sewage pumping station resumed operation during the night, and by early morning, the miners had been brought safely to the surface. But every restored power line revealed another part of the disaster: completely destroyed houses, damaged gas pipes, wrecked vehicles, and families who no longer had anywhere to return. The tornado had disappeared within minutes. Its consequences now filled the entire city. The most painful part of this story cannot be measured in kilometers or wind speed. In one house, a mother of 5 named Valentina heard the roar and saw objects rising into the air on a neighboring property. Her older children ran into a room, and almost immediately one of its walls collapsed. They were pinned beneath debris, while a fallen wardrobe blocked the entrance. Valentina could not reach them, so she shouted instructions, guiding the children with her voice while shielding her younger daughters with her own body. She injured her leg but continued holding them until friends and relatives arrived to help. The children were pulled from the wreckage. Half of the house had been destroyed, and the building could not be repaired. Elsewhere, a man was trapped beneath wooden beams after the tornado tore away the second floor of his house. Other residents were injured by shattered glass and flying debris. According to updated figures released by local authorities, 21 people required medical assistance, and 2 were hospitalized with fractures. Yet despite the scale of the destruction, not a single person was killed. In a city where dozens of homes had been destroyed, that outcome seemed almost impossible. By morning, Kushva looked as though a battle line had passed through it. 32 private houses had been completely destroyed, more than 100 others were damaged, and vehicles, a school, a kindergarten, and municipal infrastructure had also been affected. Trees, sections of roofing, and fragments of walls covered the streets. Satellite images revealed long scars across the forests surrounding the city, while footage from the ground showed small human lives caught inside that enormous trail of destruction. But Kushva did not disappear. Neighbors searched through wreckage, volunteers brought water and essential supplies, electrical crews worked throughout the night, and rescuers inspected every damaged home. This tornado entered the history of the Urals not because it was the deadliest, quite the opposite. It became historic because a powerful vortex passed directly through an inhabited city without taking a single life. Its central lesson is more disturbing than any statistic. Rare does not mean impossible. Tornadoes in the Urals often remain hidden within the forests, which makes them seem like a distant and almost foreign phenomenon. But on June 22, 2026, one of them emerged from behind a wall of rain, crossed Kushva, and reminded everyone that sometimes only a few minutes separate an ordinary evening from catastrophe.